Welcome, animation fans. My name is Dan, and this is On Animation Podcast, Episode 1. It's been just under a year since On Animation last spoke with Glen Keane. At the time, he was promoting his first short film, Duet. This year, he's back with another hand-drawn short, Nephtali, a blend of hand-drawn animation and live-action footage. Nephtali was created for the Paris Opera to coincide with the launch of their new digital stage, Third Stage. Glen was personally invited to join a distinguished list of artists and filmmakers to help launch the Third Stage by Benjamin Millepied, the new director of dance for the Paris Opera. Benjamin and Glen first met while they were both working on projects at Google last year. I was fortunate enough to steal some of Glen's time and gain more insight into the production of the short. Please enjoy this interview with Glen Keane. This interview was conducted over the phone. Please forgive the sound quality. You've recently released another short film since we last talked at CTN.
Yeah.
I'll let you pronounce it so I don't botch it.
Nephtali.
Perfect. Okay. Now there seems to be a bit of a segue since you have a ballerina dancing in Duet and a ballerina dancing in Nephtali. I was wondering if you could tell us what the original inspiration was behind it.
Well, originally I started, as I was working on Duet, Benjamin Millepied, who is the director at the Paris Opera, was going to become the director, was working on developing a project at Google. And he had seen what I was animating and connected with that, and we started talking about doing something together. He actually did a little bit of showing me how to do a pirouette that I used in Duet, and we just thought it would be wonderful to do something together, but we weren't sure exactly what. And so then when he became the director at the Paris Ballet, he created another stage, because they've got three stages there. They have the Bastille Opera, where they'll do ballet. Then they have the Garnier Opera, where it's pretty much the place where Phantom of the Opera took place, and that's like the central location, one of the most beautiful buildings in Paris. But he wanted to create a virtual stage called the Third Stage, or Troisième Scène in French. And he invited a number of directors to come to the Paris Ballet and find inspiration, do something that was just calling to you. He was not trying to impose any kind of creative direction on it, other than that we were passionate about what we were going to do. So I'd always just been fascinated with dance. It always feels to me that dance is very much an animator's kind of like another way of expressing yourself through dance. But most of the time that I've seen dance in animation, I've never felt that it was really living up to the potential. It feels like we are often way too bound by gravity, and yet animation doesn't have to be. So I thought, well, I want to do something where I can really let the figure float in the air if it needs to be, and to really draw some of the fluidity of line that feels bound even by a real ballerina. The human figure is bound by gravity. Animation can really set that free. So on my walk, we have an apartment in Paris, and I would walk from our apartment over to the Opera House, and on my way, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, as I was going to meet the ballerina Marion Barbeau. And I thought, well, maybe I would just use some of her choreography. They say that, a ballerina may have up to 60 choreographies in her muscle memory. It's just there, and they can dance it. And I thought, well, I'll just use that and animate it. And then all I could think of, though, was Ollie Johnston saying to me, Glen, don't animate what the character is doing. Animate what the character is thinking. I thought, I can't just go in there and just draw her moving. I need to really give her a motivation and a purpose and tell a little story. So by the time I got there, I had developed a little story and gave her the motivation on what these different three basic acts to this little story would be, and worked with Marianne, and she was incredible. So anyway, so that was pretty much how I developed, and the whole thing came to be.
Can you talk a bit about the creative process from studying the dancer in the studio in Paris to sitting down and actually animating it? Did you use charcoal for the end like you did in Pocahontas?
Well, there was some charcoal drawings at the very beginning of the deer, and the very end it was actually a graphite pencil, a Mitsubishi pencil that we found in order to do Duet with. It's a 10B. Found out that it's the same pencil that Miyazaki uses, which I didn't know, but it was when we were searching for it. We searched all over the world for the best pencil that had this really wonderful soft feel, and so it can look like charcoal, or it can, you can be very accurate. So that's what I did Duet with, and that's what I think that's what I'm going to draw with for the rest of my life. It's so rich and wonderful in its line. I describe it, the line as having calories to it. It's so buttery. You get fat just drawing with the pencil. But the process for me in working with the ballerinas and different dancers, at first what I did is Benjamin Millepied and Dimitri Chamblas, who are running the Paris Ballet, invited me in to sit with some of the rehearsal sessions as I was drawing Marianne Barbeau and some of the other dancers, just watching them warm up, and as I'm sketching them warming up, I'm warming up myself and realizing how much dance is very much a gestural, expressive medium where you are drawing a line of action from head to toe, and it's very expressive, and there's emotion in those lines. And as I worked with them throughout the next week, I found that working with a dancer was very much like working with an animator. They really truly were expressing themselves with their body as opposed to me with my pencil. And they were really working towards silhouette and all of the things that Frank Thomas, Ollie Johnson, Eric Larson were trying to drill into me, they were doing as well. They were trying to communicate with attitude so that somebody in the back of the theater could read the pose. There was always an anticipation and a movement, and
clear staging.
I found that staging, everything was really designed for the audiences, just communicating it clearly. As Eric would always say, make a positive statement. And something that I had learned throughout my first years at Disney were, Ollie would say, think in terms of golden poses. Even though you got 24 frames a second flashing by, it's really maybe only 3 poses in a 10-second scene maybe, or 7 seconds, that really tell the story. And just think in terms of what are these golden poses. And the more I watched ballet, I realized, wow, that's what they're all about. They're hitting these golden poses, and they may leap through the air, but the pose locks in, and it's this picture, and a pirouette is basically one pose that is frozen, but it's moving, and all of these different attitudes were carefully choreographed to tell a story in movement. And so that's what I worked with Marianne on, is what are those golden poses? Originally, in working with Benoit Philippon, who is the guy doing the live action, we were talking about actually freezing those golden poses and rotating them in space, and I would animate those golden poses like moving in dimension. But I found that it was actually hurting the more important principle, which was communicate an emotion, a story. So I decided I wasn't going to freeze those moments. So there's basically 3 acts that I worked out with it, and it very much comes from Psalm 42. And it's a sense of spiritual longing in the first movement, which goes to then conflict, a struggle, and then finally a breaking free and a freedom of expression. And those 3 emotions are in that Psalm 42. And the name Nephtali comes from when Jacob was blessing his 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. His son Nephtali, spelled with an A in the English, in the French it's with an E. So I used the E spelling since it was done in France. But Jacob says, Nephtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. And I always love just that image of the power and the grace of a deer leaping free, and in the end having the fawns as a life that's fruitful. And these are things that are very personal for me, and because I was invited in, very similar in a way as I was invited into Google to be myself, to express something personal. That's what Benjamin Millepied also was asking me to do. I find it really, really a gift for me just to come in and not have to sell something or create something that stockholders will find, fitting their guidelines. Instead, I found I had complete creative freedom. It was really a wonderful experience. And for me, drawing the figure has always been a joy for me. I mean, when I started animation, I just wanted to be a sculptor. I wanted to be a painter. And so when I animate, I'm constantly trying to find a way to draw a figure in space and turn them around and capture it. Excuse me, sorry?
Sorry, I was going to say, it sounds like that's what you were doing when you were experimenting with rotating around the golden poses. You're still experimenting with drawing in dimension.
Yeah, and very much so. And I imagine you've seen the Step Into the Page video.
Yes.
I mean, that's even another step beyond. It was funny that the day after I came back from Paris after drawing these dancers, I went up to Google to do the Step Into the Page. And in Paris, I was drawing this dancer who was leaping towards me. And I had to draw that beautiful line of action of that dancer in perspective coming at me. And yet I knew that from a profile, you would have this beautiful line of action running down the back all the way down to the feet. And that's what I wanted to draw. But instead, I had to do it in perspective. So it was sort of a frustration. And so the first thing I did when Drew Skillman, who was one of the 2 guys developing Toothbrush, the VR, when he gave me that stylus, I just drew a line going back in space as if it was that dancer, the same dancer, and then I could step around and I saw this beautiful profile line, and then I could start to draw that dancer, and that was really the first drawing that I did then in VR, was something that I found that I could never do on paper. And it was incredibly liberating, difficult. I do think it's going to take time to master that art of drawing or creating in VR. I don't think it just gives itself up without some real effort of understanding the craft. And just like animation, I remember Frank and Ollie telling me, it'll take you 5 years to at least get to a point where you're comfortable animating so that you understand what you're doing with it. I hope it wouldn't take 5 years with with this craft, but I don't have any illusions that you're just going to get it instantaneously.
Do you plan on using it for any future shorts that you might do once you've explored it a bit more?
Well, yeah, I'm developing a few ideas right now, trying to find the right partnership. Somebody who wants to collaborate and do something that's personal, expressive. I want to do something that's good. I want to do something that, I don't know, touches people in a meaningful way. I'm not interested in just the technical aspect of kind of like an object turning in space. I want them to have some emotional resonance with the audience.
Yeah.
So I'm
more than just a gimmick.
Yeah, much more than that. So I am talking to a few possible partners that we could do that with. Right now, I'm not exactly sure. And that's the thing. After leaving Disney, I left because I felt like there was something wonderful out there waiting. I didn't know what it was. Now I'm beginning to discover it. But it really is an entirely new era in animation right now. And it's not formed yet. It's very, very fluid. It's kind of like, I don't know, if you're making a sauce and at the beginning it's just very liquid and you're stirring the spoon and you're thinking this is never going to thicken up. And yeah, it's a little more flour, and pretty soon the gravy starts to get a little bit thicker, and then you have something wonderful. And I think right now it's still thin. It's beginning to thicken. And it's beginning to form into something very personal, expressive, but it takes an enormous amount of communicating with others, which is why I'm actually going out to the future of storytelling, to touch bases, to learn, to share. There's an enormous amount of collaboration that's happening right now outside of the big animation studios that I find incredibly exciting.
That sounds amazing. You talked about collaborating with somebody where you could create a story that's meaningful. Have you considered the possibility of collaborating with another major artist such as yourself? Or are you in a place right now where you have all these personal ideas that you want to explore?
Oh, well, I'm open to any kind of collaboration right now, and I'm finding that most of the people who I'm rubbing shoulders with are other artists as well. And maybe it's going to be helping somebody else accomplish a vision that they have. It doesn't have to be mine. I've spent my whole career helping directors realize their vision. Since I've left Disney, it's been a wonderful opportunity of actually realizing some of my own, but I'm really open for the right marriage of creative people together. And if it means helping somebody else tell their story or working with another artist that I'm simpatico with, then yeah, let's do it. That's how I feel.
Great.
Do you have any suggestions?
I will be sure to let you know if I do. I have a couple more questions about Nephtali. Now, in the live action footage, we see you directing the choreography of Marianne Barbeau, the dancer.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have an idea from the beginning for what you wanted the whole sequence to look like? Or was there more of an organic process where you have these two artists, one dancer and one animator, just bouncing ideas back and forth off of each other?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
See, I'd never done choreography before, though I've certainly thumbnailed so many different moments in animation that I assumed it's like that, except you are working with another person choreographing it. I remember one time in Treasure Planet, John Ripa and we animated on the same animation desk at the same time, where Long John Silver is meeting Jim Hawkins, and John and I just choreographed it very much like a dance. I mean, working around one another, and run and animate a little thing, and then he'd jump back in there, and it was so collaborative that way. That was probably the closest I've had to this experience. I watched Benjamin Millepied, who's a genius in choreography, how he worked. And he works very intuitively, almost like it would be straight ahead animation where one pose just leads into the next, and he's working with a dancer and watching them, and then something occurs to him, and then he adds on to it, and he may have some general idea, but he's really responding to the spirit of the moment. And I watched him do that, and I thought, okay, so I can relate to that. So when I came in and I met Marion Barbeau, it was scary and intimidating because I don't know dance. I mean, here's this ballerina who her whole life since she was 6 years old was working and studying, and I am not going to presume to know what she knows, but I did know that there are certain things that she needs. She needed for me to communicate the emotion that she had to have, at the very beginning, and that I knew that I needed to have this longing start in one place and have her move to the next point on the stage. And so I did little thumbnail sketches and showed her the way I thought she should move, and I mostly did them through little thumbnail drawings, sometimes trying to act them out for her, and then she would do something and have an idea how to interpret, say, this wind or this wave. In the middle of Psalm 42, it says, "Deep calls to deep in the roar of your waterfalls. All your waves and breakers have swept over me." And so I translated all of this in French to her because, and the whole thing was speaking to her in French. And so as she understood that turbulent kind of a feel, I kept looking for ways that we could get this beautiful arc of flow. I kept imagining her as if she was a drawing, even though you're working with a ballerina, I mean, a living person, I'm still imagining and seeing her as a drawing that's actually moving across a space with kind of an S curve, a French curve in the arc of her path of action, where she would fall down and onto the ground, and sometimes it would feel a little bit clunky, so I would ask her to do it again, but with a little more of a graceful descent as she would hit the ground and then rise up, and then there needed to be these changes of direction. I mean, it's basically three pieces of choreography, each one moving in its own direction. It was very simple that way. So I wrote down words for her that she could understand, the one central thought in that, from desire or longing. French doesn't have a word for longing, so I had to come up with other ways of translating that, like desire would be probably the closest, and then there would be this struggle is the second word. In French it was a different word than struggle, but it was something like that. And then liberty, freedom, was the last one. And in all of those, I did a lot of little sketches so she understood how I would do this if I was animating it, and then watching how she interpreted it. So that was how we were doing it throughout the whole process, though I was working closely with Benjamin Millepied, who was doing the live action, and he was filming the whole process, and I needed for certain angles for him to shoot because I was going to use that for reference when I came back to LA. Then when we got back to LA, I really only had 3 weeks to do all the animation in, which is what we did. And my son Max, who was production designer for Duet, also was the production designer for Nephtali, and he just has a knack of taking the drawings that I'm doing and make them look, like 100 times better. Just putting them in space and dimension.
Fantastic. I just have one final question for you. From my perspective, as a fan of yours and an observer of your career, you've accumulated all of this knowledge and expertise over decades of animating. And now you have your own company in a time with all this emerging technology at your fingertips. It seems to me that the possibilities of what somebody like you can do are really limitless. And I think I speak for everyone when I say we're all waiting in anticipation for what you're going to do next. In light of that, do you have any long-term career goals in this business? Like, what do you hope to achieve by the end of your career?
Well, I plan on living to 120. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm just beginning my career right now. I honestly say that I feel very much the way I did when I first started. I feel like I'm barely up to the task. When I started, it seemed that everybody knew so much more than I did. And I was playing catch up all the time. And I always looked to past masters of drawing and sculpture as my guide when I became stuck. I wouldn't look so much at animation as I would look at Rodin or Degas, Augustus John, and learn that way. And so now I've never lost that sense that if one of those artists from 150 years ago was transported to today, and you gave them the tools that we have today, but didn't show them any of the animation that's been done, but just showed them what's possible, what would they do? What would they come up with? That's kind of where I'm thinking of myself in that sense of like, okay, if you couldn't reinvent what you're doing and who you are as an artist and look at all of the tools afresh, you probably would never even come up with the look of Disney now. I mean, that's a look that's there because of the technical limitation of painting on cells. It would be an entirely different feeling to the way you draw. And now thinking about VR, maybe there's a way of actually animating in three-dimensional space. This is something I'm fascinated with, actually animating around me, drawing in space, as if you are sculpting that figure, but it's in line. And these are things that I'm really fascinated with, and there's been a few projects that have been cooking in my mind for 30 years now, wanting to do them, but I never felt like I was ready. Not that I feel like I'm ready yet either. At some point, I've got to dive in and start. So it's right now I'm putting my sails up and seeing what fills them and how I can accomplish these ideas. My wife's patience and encouragement along the way means a lot to me because we're in this adventure together. For me to step away from Disney was also a scary thing to do. Something that I took very seriously because I felt like I was given so much there by these great teachers that I felt a responsibility to continue to pass that on. And I realized that, even though you leave Disney, Disney never leaves you. You've still got those principles, and I'm trying to apply them into these new frontiers. I kept hearing from Ollie Johnston, he would say, "Glenn, you're going to do greater things than us someday." I'm thinking, oh man, I wish he'd never said that. That's such a burden. I can't. But now I realize he wasn't talking about greater in quality like that. He was talking about greater in application, in influence, in a way, take those same principles and apply them in ways that he couldn't even imagine. And I see that that's exactly what's happening. So
that's wonderful.
That's where I'm at today.
That is wonderful. That is a great note to end on. I will let you get on with the rest of your day, but I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to sit down and talk with you again.
Thank you, Daniel. Hey, I love your website. I mean, you've got such an incredible, comprehensive look at animation in your menu of all the different ways that you are breaking down animation, from reference to different people's samples of their own animation to masters from the past, and it's absolutely fantastic.
I'm a little like you in that I have an enthusiasm for all of it, and I just want to do it all. So,
well, I wish you the very best. I'll keep trying on my side. You keep trying on yours.
Will do. Until the next time I get the opportunity to talk to you then. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, Daniel. Bye-bye.
There isn't a person out there that's able to inspire me the way Glen does when he talks about animation. He's a master of the craft, pushing the boundaries, and I can't wait to see what he does next. If I'm lucky, I'll get to chat with him again about his future projects. If you liked what you heard, please consider supporting us on Patreon. On the next episode of On Animation Podcast, we'll be talking with Blue Sky Studios supervising animator Nick Bruno. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.